Hey, Dynamite fans, this is Alex here. It is Monday, January 13th, and I am super duper excited to be able to announce my interview guest today, the amazing David Pepose. So, David, hello.
Hi,
I'm super happy to have you here.
Alex. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Excited to chat with you.
Absolutely. So, you're here because this week, issue number 9 of Space Ghost releases.
Yeah.
And man, what a year. What a year. I
Yeah.
want to start with the first question
Sure.
is what do you think of the response to the first 8 issues?
Boy, honestly, nobody's more surprised than me. I when I took on Space Ghost, this project, I saw the potential. That this is a character who's been long overdue his time in the superheroic spotlight, and to see how many fans and readers and retailers and press and fellow creators who have all really rallied around this book. um it's exceeded more than my wildest dreams, and it's so nice to see that these characters who I've fallen in love with, seeing so many other people fall in love with them as well. And so I've been having the time of my career working on Space Ghost. It's one of my favorite books that I've ever worked on, and so nobody is more excited than me to see how excited the rest of our fandom has been for this book.
I mean, based on fan reviews, it is the best written Dynamite book of the entire year. And it has been up there with some of the best stuff the entire year. So it's thrilling. You did have a challenge because before this current Space Ghost series, I'm 34. I remember watching Cartoon Network and Boomerang and getting
Yeah,
Space Ghost Coast to Coast and being like, "What is this? This is a funny take on it." So, what was the challenge going from a humorous take that's in the popular eye of everyone knows to bringing this to, wow, how menacing this series has been and how serious this is?
sure. Yeah, I grew up in similar vintage, and so I Coast to Coast was my introduction to Space Coast. And it wasn't until my very first job in the industry, I got my start as an intern at DC. And that's when I learned who Alex Toth was, and I learned about Space Ghost. I got a copy of Joe Kelly and Ariel Olivetti's trade paperback from their run from 2005, their miniseries. And as I learned about Alex Toth and as I read that book, I realized, like, oh, Space Ghost really has like the potential to be like a real cool traditional superhero. And I'm very surprised that nobody's done anything more with that. And so, you flash forward 20 years, and Joe Rybant reaches out to me and says, would you be interested in working on Space Ghost? And I was aware of Space Ghost's DNA, sort of riding that post Adam West Batman wave, that everybody kind of wanted a piece of that pie, and so they would either license out other superhero properties or they would make an original concept of their own, like Space Ghost. I was very acutely aware of that DNA, and I was also very acutely aware that Joe Kelly had already done such a strong standalone origin story for Space Ghost himself. But nobody had really ever dug in deep into how did Space Ghost wind up in the orbit of these two kids and their pet monkey. And that really kind of became, I think, the through line of our whole series. It is very much an ensemble story. It's very much in the vein of Dr. Grant and Tim and Lex from Jurassic Park, about how sort of this gruff solo figure winds up, through his own kind of nobility, becomes a surrogate father figure to these two orphans who desperately need him. And so, yeah, that was sort of, it was sort of my weird kind of winding history, and just the versatility of Space Ghost really stood out to me. That he's a character you can tell any number of stories with, and they all feel organic. It all works in his core concept. And as somebody who loves kind of cross pollinating different strange of pop culture into my work, Space Ghost really has proven to be kind of like the perfect canvas to tell all sorts of fun superhero stories. So yeah, I've always felt, that this is a character who he has all the ingredients for success, and so it's been a real a treat and a pleasure and an honor to be able to get to explore that.
And plus, you've been able to make these villains that, I mean, Space Ghost during Coast to Coast was he was kind of a straight man almost, but
Sure.
it's the villains that were really made to be campy and kind of almost negative impacts their character. So now that we have, like Brack and Sisto and
Yeah.
Zorak and Moltar and the Creature King, and I mean, I've had multiple people tell me how Zorak is the most menacing. I mean, he's a praying mantis basically.
Yeah.
He's the most menacing that he's ever been. And that issue was issue four, I
The
believe,
4 and 5. Yeah.
4 and 5, and it was so like serious and such a good villain for Space Ghost. But reading issue number 8 and meeting General Metalis.
Yeah. Metalis has been a really fun character to get to explore. It's funny. I watched all the original episodes of Space Ghost as well as the '80s revival, and I took detailed notes on every single episode. So I have kind of this master document that I always go back to whenever I'm trying to find out, what bits of Space Ghost lore do I want to mine. And it's funny because everybody thinks of Zorak as sort of Space Ghost's arch nemesis, of course it makes sense, given that amazing Alex Toth design and given his prominence in Coast to Coast. But Metalis was actually the villain that showed up most in all of Space Ghost history. He showed up in more episodes than even Zorak, and he was a character who I really liked. I liked the scale that character had. He was the robot master. He had an army of robots and drones and big machinery, and so I knew pretty quickly this was a character that we were going to need to build towards. That this is somebody who's been kind of lurking in the periphery, who's been sort of biding his time as he amasses his forces. And the idea of him being Space Ghost's one of his arch nemesis, sort of he's the Joe Chill of this mythology. That he is the person who invaded Planet Vector. He's the one that killed Space Ghost's family. He's the one that put Space Ghost on this mission of vengeance. And yeah, so being able to finally pay that off, we've been sort of teasing little bits and pieces of it throughout the series. You see it in issue 3 when the widow says, "I'm surprised you had time to pick up children with your hunt for the Iron General." So this is something we even had like a little bit of him in issue 2. For eagle-eyed fans, you can see Metalis looming over Space Ghost as he holds his family's bodies, and so it's been nice to really been able to pay that off. And that's what's been so great about working on Space Ghost as a series, is that Dynamite has been so generous with the runway that they've given us. That's really allowed me to kind of maximize that with all these done in 1 and done in 2 storylines. So we're able to really play on a very long runway, do some real fun long form storytelling that we're then able to pay off in these fun ways, especially with Metalis. So with issue 9 coming out, you're going to see sort of the rematch of Space Ghost and Metalis, and it's I think every bit as propulsive and dynamic as anything we've done in the series to date.
It sounds like you're really enjoying the process of figuring out which characters to use and figuring out how to bring them to life.
Yeah, definitely. There's a malleability to them. Alex Toth, he's a genius. I mean, everyone calls him the Jack Kirby of Hanna-Barbera, and I think that's absolutely accurate. He was an idea machine, and it's his designs also, I think, did so much heavy lifting. Because these original episodes, they were 5 minutes a pop. There was not a lot of time for character development, very little in the way of continuity until the Council of Doom shows up. Those designs, though, really spoke volumes. And so for me, it's been kind of taking those characters and figuring out like what stands out the most to me about them. You mentioned Zorak, as a praying mantis, and that to me was something I wanted to dig into. Is like, that's not a human way of thinking. Like, that's a brain that's altogether alien to us. And so how do we kind of lean into that kind of unsettling quality? And so for him, having him be a cult leader, being the Charles Manson of space, that was kind of my way of showing this unsettling villain who's got a mindset that is completely alien to anything you and I might be aware of. And so, yeah, doing that with each of the villains has been really nice, sort of building out. We knew that Space Ghost is the connecting thread for all these characters, but then how do we kind of build them up into their own pantheon of villains? And so, building the Council of Doom together in that way has been really exciting, and I think readers are going to want to stick around to see how all that pays off.
What would you say has been the hardest challenge so far?
I think the hardest challenge um is some of it is just making sure that like everything kind of has its own unique flavor to it. You don't want to double up if you can avoid it. Honestly, the best the hardest challenge has also been the best part of the series for me, which is honestly it's keeping up with Jonathan Lau, my artist and co-creator of the book. He is such a talented, amazing artist who has stuck around through the entirety of the series, which is no mean feat. He's taken no breaks. He draws like a machine, and so for me, it's keeping up with him, making sure that he's not sitting in his hands, waiting for scripts. But yeah, I think beyond that, this series has been such a gift in that it does allow me to follow my heart. It allows me to kind of follow my instincts. It allows me to kind of chase my passions. And the done in one and done in two element of it all means that I don't get restless. It means I can say, I would really like to do a heist story. And so we did that for The Widow. I would like to do kind of a more horror tinged thing. And that was our two-parter with Zorak. I said I wanted to do kind of a big sprawling sci-fi battleground. And so that has become our Metalis two-parter. And so that's been really neat for this series. And that's really kind of, I think, made it such a joy to write. It's not a hard book for me to write. If anything, it's been one that's been so freeing. And so that's another reason why I'm so grateful for the kind of response we've gotten.
I mean, that's a good segue. So, like with Jonathan Lau, like what is what is that collaboration process been like?
Man, Jonathan is honestly, he's one of the most talented collaborators I've ever had. He is a true artist, a true storyteller. He adds so much to the final product. He really he is just as instrumental in how a story is built as I am. He'll make choices that often will kind of add their own unique curveballs to what I've written in the script. He is fantastic. He's got such a range to him, which I was so impressed. From his earliest pages. Not only does he do this like amazing bombastic action, which everybody has rightfully said how great he is at it, but he also has a real emotionality to his work. He's able to really nail those emotional beats, particularly with Jan and Jace. And I think that was the thing that always struck me about working with Jonathan from the very beginning, was that he understood that this is an ensemble book. This is Space Ghost and Jan and Jace and even Blib. And it'd be so easy to cast those kids, relegate them in the background, make them accessories to Space Ghost. But Jonathan understands that this is their book. This is really, they're the POV characters for the whole series. And so he's never ignored them. And he's really wrung out some wonderful emotional beats with all these characters. So I can't say enough good things about Jonathan Lau. And so seeing the pages that he's turned in and working with Andrew Dahlhaus, our colors too, they really are a dynamic duo. And then sort of Taylor Esposito kind of rounding out the pack and making sure that the book works. I'm very fortunate to work with such an amazing creative team on this. Jonathan's MVP for sure.
And the book looks amazing. So speaking of issue number 9,
the
fight against General Metalis has gotten extremely personal. The Space Ghost, I won't say, but you kind of hit on it a little bit earlier. But what can we expect in this upcoming issue?
Yeah, I thought of this issue as Die Hard in a spaceship. This is without spoiling too much. Space Ghost has found himself on the back foot in a very serious way, and he's now going to have to navigate Metalis's mothership with no powers, and so he's going to have to really rely on his grit and his wit. to make it out to the other side. And meanwhile, the twins think he's dead. And so the twins are trying to figure out, like, how do we help people on the ground? How do we kind of staunch General Metallis's invasion of the Federation homeworld? And so they're going to have to rise to the occasion in their own way. But I think it really is, it's very intense, is the way that I would describe this book. But I think this is maybe the biggest emotional roundhouse that I think we've given our readers to date, and I think really pays off Space Ghost and Jan and Jace's arcs in a really nice way. Yeah, this is definitely we're cranking the dial to 11 on this book, and this issue in particular, and so I can't wait for fans to see what we've got planned.
Beyond issue number 9, in your own series, what can you tell us for the future with Space Ghost and Jan and Jace?
Yeah. Well, boy, we've got some really fun stuff planned. Next month's issue, we introduce Space Spectre, who is sort of the dark mirror version of Space Ghost, and that is a character that really grew on me in a very short period of time. He's got secrets. He's got a mission of his own, and it's going to put him head to head with Space Ghost and Jan and Jace. And yeah, that issue is spectacular. I just got the coloring on that issue now, so I'm going to be looking at that later today. And then yeah, I don't think it's a huge spoiler to say we've been building up to this for quite some time throughout our whole series. Space Ghost has fought this pantheon of cosmic supervillains, and now they are going to unite as a super group. We will be introducing the Council of Doom in an epic 3-parter for the series. So yeah, that's the stuff that I can share presently. But yes, some big stuff coming for Space Ghost and Jan and Jace. We will get to see the Council of Doom in action, and we will find out what RoboCorps has been building to all this time.
Oh, that's exciting. Separately, in case you fans aren't aware, there is also a Space Ghost Johnny Quest upcoming crossover. Space Quest. It's releasing March 12th from Joe Casey and Sebastian Perez. So if you want even more Space Ghost and to see Space Ghost interact with one Johnny Quest, get ready for that as well.
I can tell you, I've read the first 2 scripts for that series. It's really fun. So you should definitely check it out. Joe is doing some really fun stuff with this, and I'm a huge fan of Sebastian's artwork. So you should definitely, if you're a fan of what we're doing in Space Ghost, you should definitely check out Space Quest as well.
Awesome. No, I'm super excited. It's going to be great. I do want to ask you, what else are you working on right now?
Yeah, boy, the stuff that I can talk about. So I am writing Cable, Love, and Chrome over at Marvel. Our first issue just came out on January 1st. You can pre-order issue 2. Actually, final order cutoff is today, so call your local comic shop and get that added to your pull list. That is Edge of Tomorrow meets The Fault in Our Stars, as Cable finds himself stranded in a city that is fully infected with the techno-organic virus, and finds himself in the midst of a brutal civil war that will change his life forever. I'm working with artist Mike Henderson on that. It's a super fun book. I also am the writer of Speed Racer, which will be debuting at Mad Cave Studios on Free Comic Book Day. So I can't say who the artist on the book is yet, but all I'll say is they are terrific. This is brand new continuity, similar approach to what I'm doing on Space Ghost. You don't have to have watched anything to enjoy what we're doing on Speed Racer, but it's Rocky in a race car, as we see how Speed Racer goes from being a street racer to becoming the fastest race car driver in the world. So definitely check that out. Free Comic Book Day will have our first issue, and then I believe that series will kick off in earnest in August. And then a few other projects that haven't been announced yet. I've got some creator-owned stuff coming. I've got some licensed stuff coming. All of it is going to be super, super fun. Very busy 2025, so be sure to check it all out.
That's exciting. I do want to ask you this. What are some of the writers? You working on multiple publishers, multiple series at once. What are some of the writers who have inspired you throughout your career to bring you where you are today?
There's a bunch. Devin Grayson, her work on Batman, Gotham Knights is kind of like a Rosetta Stone to how I put all of my work together. So she is terrific. Jeff Johns is a huge influence. I love the way that he does concept work, that he really digs into a character's concept and then extrapolates that to dig into their personality. Green Lantern is Justice Society of America. He's doing great stuff on Rook Exodus right now. Rick Remender is another big influence in the way that I pace action sequences. Yeah, those are off the top of my head. Oh, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa. I love his work on Afterlife with Archie. You can see a lot of that influence, especially in my creator-owned work, but also the way that I like to do mashups. So yeah, those are the ones that come off the top of my head. But honestly, I'm a Wednesday warrior. I'm reading books every single week, and I'm drawing inspiration from everything. So a real embarrassment of riches that I get to draw from. It's really nice.
Do you have like a golden project of what you would want to adapt in the future if you had your choice of anything?
I do, but I can't tell you about it because we'll be announcing that book soon.
Is that what I think it is?
It is.
Well, then all I can say is that let's end this interview by saying that David does have another big Dynamite series announcing soon.
Yes.
It is not announced yet. I mean, it is not public, but all I can say, it's pretty big, pretty world size, pretty big. So
it's pretty big. It's been my white whale for many years, and when I found out that Dynamite had this, I demanded that Nick Berrucci give me that book, and he was kind enough to do so. So I can't wait for people to see this book. The only thing I'll say is that if you're liking what we're doing on Space Ghost, this is kind of the perfect kind of companion piece.
You know how I feel, so I can't wait for that announcement to be public, which it should be public, I believe, either this week or next week. Very, very shortly, we're going to announce that, but
you don't have to wait long.
Get ready. So I do want to thank David for being here with me. David, where can people find you on social media?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Pepose D. It's just my last name, first initial. On Facebook at David Pepose Comics. You can subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/pepnews. Or you can visit my website, which is back in action, at davidpepose.com.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining us. And again, Space Ghost #9 from David Pepose and Jonathan Lau releases this Wednesday, January 15th. So head on down to your local comic book store and say, Space Ghost #9.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.